Okay, so I thought we'd do a technical one today, given how much fun I'm having porting the pack over to 1.20.5. Yeah, slow progress. So there's some stuff we'll go over, basically, what was and what it is now, along with some issues that I have uncovered, which we'll probably start there. So if I am quick enough, when we do data get entity and we go for an arrow, well, a tipped arrow this time, right? So tipped arrow. Is it not tipped arrow? It's just arrow? Must be just arrow. Anyway, so I do that, and then limit equals 1, sort equals nearest, and we go ahead and we fire this guy, just up in the air, do that, we get the data, right? So as we can see now, any entity that has an item component, right? So what was NBT is now components as well. So you can, take an arrow from the inventory, strip the data, and convert it to the actual item. Now, what you should notice here, though, is this is a lowercase, and this really irks me because it is inconsistent everywhere, right? So depending on whether or not something's just on the ground, right, potion, or any, again, entity that uses item. If it is something new, it is lowercase. If it is something old, right, that pre-existed, I'm pretty sure it is capital, and that is very irksome because, well, if it's inconsistent, it just is a giant hurdle for you to actually do data. Right, so item, ground, very old. Items are always, item, then tag instead of components, capital, lowercase. So you got to keep that in mind, and I would highly suggest, whatever you do, to always check with the data get, just to make sure, because obviously the wikis and forums, all that is somewhat inconsistent at the moment. And we do the same with a potion, right? So potion, throw this bad boy out. Was I quick enough? I was, perfect. We can see there, again, potion's old, has item in capital. So be aware of that inconsistency. Now, my history with bug reports is most of the things that I've reported as bug reports aren't actually bugs, right? So I had a whole stint with the interaction entity. So I will probably at some point make a bug report, but I don't know how to correctly word it to get them to see this as a bug, because again, it's just an inconsistency of language. It's not technically a bug, right? It's a syntax error. So yeah, so just before we get into it, I'll be very wary that capitalization and consistency across everything is still awful. So check your data before you actually start making changes. Again, so far I know for certain arrows, obviously item, then ground items and potions or anything that you used to just have an item clause. So for instance, anything in the inventory is still capital, and then anything new that they've added components to is now unfortunately lowercase. So I assume with entities it's lowercase as well, but I don't know, we'd have to double check at some point. Anyway, let's crack into what was and what is now, right? So again, converting items from tags or NBT to now components, and then also converting, say, potion effects and area effect clouds, because area effect clouds, in all honesty, did give me a bit of trouble because the little explanation is not that helpful, right? Because it's summarized as is now equivalent to world gen settings for particles. And I personally have never touched world gen. I don't know if you have, so I had to figure this one out because there are a few like the Shriek that have, special details that even a few compilers online that, like MC Stacker, I want to say, again, I don't use them, I like learning, aren't consistent, but I did look this up. Anyway, let me figure out what exactly we're doing before and after, and then we'll go through them. Okay, so we'll start with components, right? So we have Jigsaw, and now we're able to assign the different components. So for instance, we're using custom data. So instead of a squiggly bracket, you're now using a square bracket, right? And instead of just having a long chain of NBT, you're now specifying these equal terms, right? So you're manually setting the data as if it was, say, the data modify command, right? So we can set custom data, different values, we can set custom name, you can set custom model, right? All of the syntax is quite easy to understand. It's very reminiscent of what it once was without the plethora of brackets and separation, for instance, right? So for instance, with custom name, you don't need the extra brackets or the quotation marks because it goes into that display parameter. It's now completely separate. So for instance, law and custom name now are their own separate components rather than being grouped, right, under display, which is a bit annoying because there were things, for instance, you could just find whether or not the display pathway is there, right, for an item. Now you have to look for custom name, for law, or just normal name if you do use any of that. So we're giving ourselves a jigsaw block with name and law, as well as that custom data. So if we look at it, and I can remember which one of these is just a basic item, which I can't, so we'll just do item again, right? What we see is we have custom name, no brackets, and we have law. square brackets. Now this is really important because there is default formatting, right, is what we'll call it. So for instance, curly brackets are gone because we did not specify anything other than text. So although I did text and then it's what its value is set to, so in this case defense and ABC or DEF, right, because I haven't set italics, bold or color, they do not get filled in, so the brackets disappear. And if you're searching for it, right, using any predicate or, execute check, right, if item equals this, then you need to remember that the brackets don't exist. So if you're just setting the value, it will default its format. And it's important because there are a few other ways to, control color. For instance, there's the new rarity components, and then same with law. If you want to have separate lines, you can still just do text, which makes it easier to edit and shorter. But what I would highly suggest is you get into the habit of writing everything out. So for instance, if we were to add in the rest of the syntax, so for instance, with law, bold, color, italics, what we'll then see is, again, if we grab the data, right, now they're fully filled out. Now, this order is also something you should probably remember, right? Bold, color, italic, because this is the order that it's always set. So for instance, if we were to give ourselves another item and I were to delete, for instance, the color and italics, we'll start with that, right? And we go ahead and we do the same thing. We check its data. What we see now is we have bold and text, again, same order. If I were to then put the italics, for instance, back, but we put it before the bold, what happens is we go italic, and then false, comma, and we check the item. We now see that bold gets put beforehand, right? So again, depending on whether or not you include them all, there's still ordering, and whether or not you have actually put every single one. So again, bold, italic, and color, there is still that set order, but it always goes alphabetically, right? So B, C, I, T, right? That's the easiest way to remember it. But I would personally get in the habit of always setting everything so that you don't have mismatched items, right? So again, brackets will automatically be set and controlled. So for instance, if you put in quotation marks, which still works, it will then default back to the apostrophes, and then also again, brackets, right? So do keep all that in mind when you're checking stuff. Okay, so next up, we'll look into custom data basically, right? So we've specified T, E, S, 1A, 2B, and 3C. A little bit more complicated because again, you can just specify whatever values here. In fact, you don't even need the quotation marks. Obviously, if you had a space something, yes, you'd have to put in quotation marks, but we'll do that, and we'll give ourselves the item, right? So we'll just get its data, if I can remember which one. There we are. So we have custom data, S, 3C, T, 1A, and E, 2B. Now B, as you can see, has been converted over to a byte, right? Whereas the others are just straight values because there's nothing for C and A. So if you use F, it'll go to a float, and D double, for instance, right? So testing for these, right? So again, we'll use an if statement. Now we have, oh, is that the right one? No, that's the give. Should have it typed out, there we are, yeah. Right, so we have 3, and 3 was equivalent to C. Right, so item, components, Minecraft custom data, and then whether or not S is equivalent to 3C. As we can see, pass it. So again, the pathway, remember all the components are in quotation marks now because they have the 2 dots, right? So item components, because it's on the ground, if it's in your hand or anything like that, select the item. In fact, we can just do that nice and simply, right? So if we change it from the ground item to an S, us, instead of item, we do selected. Did I spell selected? No, I just forget the first. E, selected item, right, still passes. Again, we can then go to 3, or I should say 2B. So this, oh, no, because we've got E, there we go, passed again, right? And then same with the other command. So there's 2 ways you can utilize this. You can either look specifically for whatever custom data you've entered, right, which allows you to have giant arrays that are meaningful to you and whatever you're making, or you can also just straight up test for the pathway and treat them like they're flags. So for instance, if we, instead of writing out the entire pathway, we use the dots, right? So, oh, don't forget the quotation marks, right, selected item, components, Minecraft data, and then we're just looking for the slot. In this case, it's just the E. We do that, right? It'll still pass, and all we're doing is checking whether or not the pathway exists rather than an actual value. So that is useful in itself, and that's pretty much how you can make use of custom data. Again, it's probably the most versatile aspect of the components now that you can, again, set anything you want, meaning that you can create anything you want off of this metric, and it's a bit more dynamic than, for instance, scoreboards, right? But again, it's in relation to having an item in your inventory, having an item nearby, an entity nearby. Again, you can use almost anything that has an item component, because then off that you can go components, you can go custom data, right? So you could spawn in a stationary floating arrow somewhere, right? That then has these components for you to check and use them as, again, checks for whatever pack you are orchestrating. But yeah, so that is pretty much the components, right? Again, so instead of being tag, it's now components, and instead of everything being grouped together as NPT, they're now separate and individual, right? Same with display, same with everything that is unique. Again, the wiki has has them all written out basically, right? All the different components you can utilize and generally how you orchestrate writing them out. Now, some big changes though to mention, I would say, is the way that potion effects are situated and enchantments as well. So if we go to give ourselves anything, again, we'll just use the jigsaw, right? And we try to set the components. This time we do enchants, right? So now it is a bit more complex is the way I'd put it, right? Because it's been completely rewritten the way you actually write out how enchantments are stored on an item. In fact, the easier way for me to actually do it, rather than trying to type it out, is just grab an enchant book, right? So we drop that, we get its data, that one, right? So what we see now is we have levels, and then we have protection equal to 1, right? So instead of stating the ID of the enchantment and then its levels separately, they're now unified. Again, so left side is whatever enchantment you're trying to add, and then its level, right? So nice and simple. And in terms of, you know, adding extra enchants, right? Levels, bracket, so instead square bracket, and then extras, right? So that I will type out to make it a bit more simplified. Right, so sharpness protection, nice and simple. Again, just comma, right? So Minecraft sharpness, again, they're inside the internal brackets of levels, and this dictates anything, right? So you can write out as many as you want. They also have a unified ordering, again, similar to the other formats. So did this one change? I can't remember if it did. No, but if we did, for instance, protection sharpness, it should look identical. Protection, and then sharpness, and then also the data that's stored on it should be therefore unified. Yeah, so it goes sharpness, protection. So there is now an ordering to enchantments, which means that in testing for them or anything like that, they'll always occupy the same positions relative to one another, right? So regardless of what we typed out, sharpness still was formatted first. So again, there's a lot of consistent formatting, which again is healthier for the game in the long term, but is stuff to be wary of because any habit you have, if it's not, again, equivalent to the new standardized format, is probably something you should relearn or at least figure out, you know, this is going to change to this once it's in a pack. Because in my case, right, I read out loot tables, I read out custom items, and then figured this out. And a lot of them, again, I was in the habit of going text, then color, then italics, then bold, right, which I think was the old way as well, but it's now obviously alphabetical, right, which means that, again, what I'm generating, what I'm typing out is not the same. So if I were to test for it, I need to be in the habit of testing for the correct format, if that makes sense. Hopefully. I'm not, again, great at tutorials or explanations, so hopefully this is useful. Anyway, we'll move on to particles, right? So particles were another big change. So for instance, if we use the item particle, right, we now have to specify a map-like key, right? Again, terminology is not my thing, but yeah, so we have to go brackets, right? And then we have to specify what the actual item is for it to actually function, which in the case of this one, I have not committed to memory yet, right? So I did have to look it up. There we go. So it's curly brackets, then item, so that's the ID, and then whatever the item is now. You can, with block, for instance, it's a bit different. Instead of item, it's block state, and you can then define the different block states, but again, we'll just show that it's correct. So we do that, right? So item redstone, and then here you can change to whatever item particle you want. Again, if we change it to block, we now handle with block state. So instead of item, it's instead block state. So block underscore states, and then you specify whatever the block state is, right? This would just be a normal stone because it doesn't have the other block states. And then the other one is dust, right? Which now has a bunch of ones to use, right? We have color, right, into square brackets, and then the 3 values, which use float again, unlike components, right? And then we have scale, which then gets set to whatever it is. And I'm guessing, no, I didn't mess up the brackets, right? So color, scale, again, if you typed it out, it was the same thing, right? You'd go usually the 4 extra numbers. So 1, 2, 3, then scale, and then all the normal values for the particle. So again, this is just for unification, right? It's a bit annoying, again, converting stuff over, especially a multitude of particles. The other one, right, shriek, because this one's a bit annoying that I had to look up. It's delay, so curly brackets, right, not squares, and I believe it's just delay, and then you specify what the delay is, right? So basically whatever the name of the value you were setting, if you remember the old particles, or if you're looking them up on the wiki, is now what you type into the brackets, right? So item, delay, block state, color, scale for dust and falling dust. Well, falling dust is the block state, sorry, dust color transition, where you do, actually that one's a bit more complex because it's from color to color instead of color, right? So I didn't save it, did I? No, because I didn't use it, right? So instead of being color square brackets, it's to color, then square brackets, and then you specify the 4 digits, then you do scale. I might as well type it out. Scale, and then you do I messed up. It's from and then to, yeah. Again, square brackets, right? So instead of this one being to, this one should be from, and this is why you don't talk and type, because as you can see, what I said, I typed, not what I actually want to type, right? And then again, you specify the 3 values as floats. So 0, 0, 0 in this case, doesn't really matter, right? Same thing. It won't go blue, obviously, because I'm on Shriek. Let's see if it does work. Dust, color transition. Yeah, there we go, right? So from color, scale, to color. Right, now area effect clouds. This is where it gets a bit more complex because you have to put this inside the bracket of the area effect cloud, right? So if we do /summon area effect cloud, right? If we want to actually change whatever the data is, right? So if you want to specify a particle instead of just a color, how do we go about that? Right, so another one I had to look up through my files, but yeah, so particle, and then this time you're specifying the type, and then Minecraft Klloo, and then again, in the case of item, that's when it gets complex because now you have to then specify the item similar to what we did for the actual particle command. So you go type, and then in here, you start specifying the item again. So item, oh, it's not typing because I clicked off it to open my own files, right? So again, item, lowercase, and then you specify whatever the item is. So Minecraft, we'll just do redstone, right? That gives us a little redstone thing. Not that I set any dimensions to the area effect cloud, so it doesn't actually appear, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Similarly, if you were to set block, you then set block state. Dust, you'd set the color and the scale, so they'd be separate entities, right? So this would be color, again, square brackets. Oh, that's not square brackets, and that's not the dots, right? And then scale as well. God, I'm not typing well today, right? Not curly brackets, no brackets, right? Just a value. Yeah, right? So if you were to specify dust, right? So again, they just go in the brackets with the type of particle. You don't have to then add them on as, again, brackets or I guess a map key, right? Because that's what the command said. Okay, so I think we're almost there. The last one is potions. That's what else gave me a little bit of trickiness converting them over. Okay, so potions have been converted to the component, and that component is again used in everything. So Minecraft dot potion contents underscore, right? And then inside here you can specify everything like you would a normal component. This goes for area effect clouds, for potions, for items, right? Again, using the components across the board, which again makes it a little bit confusing because the unification isn't completely unified, right? I assume we'll get another big update where they tackle entities, and that will be another nightmare in itself, right? Where they're all converted again to the same terminology. But again, to make it clear, there is still a lot of typos, I'm going to call them, right? Where stuff is not equivalent. Again, the misuse of item being capitalized in lowercase, the old use of still things being, you know, the 2-word capital. I don't know how to refer to things properly, right? So selected item compared to now where you have everything being lowercase, and if it's 2-word hyphenated, so I'm trying to type out container, right, where you specify the number slot, right? So that is something to be wary of. We are still, I would say, in a big transitional phase, and as annoying as it is that it's not all rolled out at once, right, it's pretty understandable because it is a huge undertaking on Mojang's behalf, but it does mean that once we're done with this, there'll probably be some more to come, unfortunately. Anyway, hopefully that helps out a little bit. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will do my best to look into them if I can't, you know, answer on the spot. Other than that, happy converting to 1.20.5. Yeah, it's taking me a lot longer than expected, so I'm sure it's rough on everyone. So yeah.